Meeting to order. We're going to get started at 6:30. A joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. But do you need to open?
Yeah, I just want to reconvene. We just came out of executive session to reconvene in open session. So
Okay.
we're ready to go.
Okay. And then just a reminder that Norton Media is here recording the meeting. If anybody else is, we just need to know. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So the first thing we're going to go over with a global, do you want to go back and forth with like one from our agenda and then one from yours?
Sure.
You want to do that? Okay. So
Go first.
thank you. Shared positions.
So, thank you to the Board of Selectmen for attending tonight. You have before you a packet of our information, of discussions that Mike and I have been having about shared positions. We just wanted to provide the Board of Selectmen, School Committee as well, with the plumber, electrical, boiler, mechanical, air, current contracts that we have, with all expiring for us on June 30th of this year. So these are our four. We're not asking for any decisions tonight, of course, as we all know, but so that you can take a look at what you folks pay compared to what we pay. As you probably know, we utilize it more because we have more buildings, et cetera. But these are our rates based upon bid process that we go through every 3 years. The plumber, I believe, based on the unfortunate loss of our local plumber a year ago, required us to go out and as part of a new bid, if you will. We decided to just go until June. Then we had somebody July 1st. It didn't work out. To be quite honest, we went out again. So this reflects that new bid, which goes through June 30th of this year. And then we also provided you with the financials, so you can take a breakdown of how much some of this stuff is actually costing us. Again, I'm not one to typically just read the stuff out loud. You have it in front of you tonight for the first time, and with the potential that we're meeting again on the 24th to discuss a little bit of these topics anyways on the competitive or the performance procurement process. Might be an opportunity for us to take a look at this information one more time, and we'll take questions at that time. The concern for me is always not the type of work that we're getting. On our side, the concern is every 3 years, I have no idea who potentially is going to be working for the schools. And that could be a very difficult situation when it comes to schools that have aging, whatever, electrical, plumbing, because I can assure you that in one of these, I won't say which, but in one of these, we had to change vendor, because what we were seeing was that the folks coming out to do the job were spending a lot of time looking at a handbook, a manual on how to do the work, because they were trained in today's stuff we might actually have, or did have, yesterday's stuff.
Still have it.
And we still have it. So it required us to, we just felt that, you know, a job that we thought could take 4 to 6 hours was taking 8 to 12 hours, and we're paying it at a rate in or around the rate that you see before you. So, you know, it's an opportunity for us to work together. Potentially you folks have another company that would like to grow, not just have the small amount of buildings that you have, but haven't really dabbled in the school, or vice versa. We might have somebody who's already working with us, and that's all a procurement process. So it's a matter of, I think, the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, through Mike and I, deciding on how you want that process to work, in terms of who puts out the RFP, what does it look like, what are the specs on it, what does it mean, and then giving the authority to the town manager and myself to move forward with the process of the low bid, and then just bringing it back to you folks as a recommendation.
Yeah,
So that's
it
kind of
makes a lot of sense. We're doing RFQ,
Yeah.
so they're qualified to do it first. And then if we all work together in all our buildings, it just makes more sense, and especially on the town side, because we do have some very old equipment we're trying to hold together. But it makes perfect sense for both groups, both sides of government to work together and come up with a program. I'm not sure 3 years is the right one. Maybe we could talk about that. Maybe we enter into a 1 year, 2 year agreement where we set up specific things. Now, the last company I worked for, in the case of, say, HVAC units, we we established what it would take, how long it should take to fix it. We didn't give them the opportunity to say, well, this might take me 8 hours. Well, no, according to engineering information we have, this should only take you 2 hours, and that's what we're gonna pay for. And, you know, you establish that from the get-go, and let them know what you're thinking right up front. Right? I think anytime we can do a joint venture between all phases of government, in the long run, we're gonna save some money. Then we have 4 people who we can contact and make that happen. I would add one more though, I would add elevators. Because we only have one, but, you know, the schools have a number of them, and I think we could probably do a better job. When we have a problem with our elevator, it costs a lot of money.
So it's interesting that you say that because, and Wade, feel free to add in, but if I remember correctly in my discussions with Mike, you folks go out for a 3-year for elevators. We have to have it inspected more often than you folks do. So that's a major difference. But that doesn't mean that we can't put out an RFQ and RFP process that actually outlines that and allows for us to work with the same company.
Yeah, we have one elevator and we have one lift. We have a lift in the Selectmen School Committee, which nobody uses, but we have to have that certified, and it has to be working condition.
So we have JCS, middle school, high school, and Yale. We do not have one at the LGN. So that kind of changes things a little bit.
2 chairlifts.
But we have, 2 chairlifts.
Yeah.
So we'll add to that discussion as well.
Okay.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, we'd like to go over the, I've given you all a copy of the warrant town meeting. I don't have a copy of it, I brought some extra and passed them around, but hopefully we'll get a copy. And what we thought, this would be a great opportunity for us to review the 5 articles that are coming up, just so everybody's on the same page, we don't understand what's all about. Now, this is a special town meeting, we call it, the Board of Selectmen call it, because we have a company who wants to install a solar facility down on Bay Road. And in order to clean up some of the language in our bylaws, we had to call a special meeting for that purpose. The applicant is actually going to pay the expenses of the special town meeting, all the costs incurred in that town meeting. So obviously it was a no-brainer for us to go ahead and make it happen. So a couple of things on the warrant. On Article 1, and that's the article for prior year bills.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
On Article 1, it's regarding prior year bills, and there'll be no action because they're on the prior year bills. And by the way, I'd like to apologize on behalf of Mike Unice. We believe he has the flu. And he came down late yesterday, and he's been housebound today. He was going to try to make it tonight, but unfortunately, he didn't think it would be a good idea, and I totally agree. I don't want him here with you. Keep your flu at
No
home.
offense. Hope he feels better.
We're going to sit over there next week.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good idea not to have him here. Article 2. Now, Article 2 is a rescind borrowing that we've done. What this is over the years, we've authorized a number of articles, like take the top one for an example, Norton High School, that's done. You know, it's still on our books. Land acquisition to Crane Farm, that's done, it's on our books. Land acquisition there, Norton Reservoir Dam spillway, it's all done. You know, the sewer connection, it's all done. So what this is we're trying to clean up the unused portion, unissued portions of it, and take them off our books. So in order to do that, we have to go back and town meeting and rescind these votes that we made from 2011, 13, 14, and 15, and make them go away. Just to clean up.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When we have open borrowing authority, does that negatively affect our credit rating? I.e., we have the
Well,
ability
yeah,
to...
it definitely will, and, you know, obviously, the accountant wants to put these things on the books, it's inflating what numbers when the appropriations is designed for a specific purpose. And in this case, we can't use it for anything else.
Yeah.
So we need to clean it off the books.
Okay.
And
The fact that it's
up
open
more,
negative
it could have an
affects us.
impact on our credit rating
Okay.
also. Okay, Article 3 is an article to, okay, Article 3 is the town common. And what we did is, on Article 3, we appropriated money on October 23rd, 2017 at the town meeting. And we're very specific about it being used for the purpose of only being used for defense. Well, we got creative and we we save a lot of money by doing a lot of the work ourselves. And so there's a few extra $1,000 left over, there's about 18,000 left, that we can't use for any other purpose. So what this is going to do, Article 3 is going to allow us to expand the use of that money to be used for other parts of the town council to get the project done. We're about 85% complete. But we still have a lot of things we have to work on. We still have benches we haven't installed, we have lighting we haven't installed. We have, some of the fencing hasn't been finished yet. We have to rebuild the gazebo. We have the horse trough that has to be repaired. Flowers, bushes, lighting still, some lighting issues we have. So there's a lot of stuff that still has to be done. We have money set aside on the gift account to take care of it. And what this is going to do is going to move that extra money and expand it so that we can use it for other purposes, just to finish the project.
Did you end up putting speakers?
Yeah,
Electrical
actually, it was
outlets?
funny, we were looking at that, and with the wireless speaker system they have today, where you can put them anywhere we want them, we thought it might be better off for us to look into, at the conclusion of this, if we have money left, to find out if there's a program, an amplifier system or something that we can purchase that will be wireless. You know, and we can put the speakers in where we want to put them.
Yeah.
We originally thought about putting them in the post for the lamps.
Right.
But there's only 5 lamps going on the property, and all of those will be right up along the walkway and in the center. And that's going to be it. So we're going to look at other creative ways to make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah, anyone who's been there knows PA systems, they will work
Yeah.
very close to it. And Article 5 is what I talked about earlier. This is the approval of solar tax agreement. It's rather lengthy. You can find a copy of it in your warrant. The whole purpose of this, there's 2 reasons for it. One is to...
Bob, I think you skipped over 4.
I'm sorry, I skipped over 4? Yeah. Okay, Article 4 is the developers looking to develop the solar farms. And this is a change in our bylaws. And we have to adopt the bylaws in order to allow the use of solar panels on cranberry bogs. This is a brand new state law. And what they're doing is they're utilizing cranberry bogs for solar farms with the understanding that the cranberries will still be grown underneath the solar panels. So it's kind of a unique type of situation, but it is going to allow us the opportunity to utilize some of these bogs. Now, we own the Slattery property down behind where Mrs. Cohen lives. We have 8 cranberry bogs out there. They're abandoned, but they're out there. Under this new bylaw, we'll be able to utilize that area for solar panels that we're trying to put out there ourselves on behalf of the town. So Article 4, I think is yeah. This is the one where they're trying to negotiate a pilot agreement with the solar company, and it's on map 6 of lot 11. And again, that is to allow a negotiation between the Board of Selectmen and the construction of these solar panels with Next Sun Energy to build this facility. What that's going to do for us, it's going to generate $200,000 a year of pilot payment and little taxes. We've negotiated a deal with the developer already, which, by the way, this is a privately owned property. So we instead of taxes, we're going to take an annual income of $200,000 a year for 20 years. It's a $4 million project that the town will benefit from. This is cash coming into our accounts. So we're very excited about this. We think it's going to be a win-win for them and for us also. So that's what Article 4 is about. Article 5 is the one that changes the actual zoning to allow these large-scale ground-mounted photovoltaic systems to be allowed in the town of Norton. It's rather extensive. There's just a couple of changes that made in it. But we did forward this on to it was created by town council, we forwarded it on to the planning board, and they approved the bylaw with a couple of recommendations, which we made changes. There's a couple of words we made that wants to change. But at their meeting, they did report back to us that they do support the chart changes, the bylaw changes, the zoning bylaw changes for this purpose. And again, it's going to open us up for other opportunities we might be able to take advantage of in the future. So that's the 5. Also on Article 5, on Article 4 rather, we're trying to become a green community. And, you know, every year we go to the Mass Municipal Association and look at the map and we're embarrassed to walk away and realize that we're not one of the green communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. What it does is allow, under this solar bylaw, this is what they call a stretch code, and that's what this is. By adopting this next spring, in May of 2019, we're going to come back with another bylaw that's going to allow the stretch code zoning. By doing that, we will become a green community. You know, probably Joe can tell you better than I can, but when you fall in the green community, it opens you up for all kinds of different programs. There's all kinds of grants out there. There's a lot of stuff that comes with it. And we've been very lax in not making this happen. And with these next 2 steps, the next 2 town meetings, we can correct those issues, and we will become committed. And that'll benefit all of us. So a lot of programs out there are very, very, very important. But that's the 5 articles for the town warrant. Anybody have any questions?
I have one. I think you kind of answered it. So the cranberry bogs will still be underneath the solar panels, so that is still protecting the bogs. So let's say in 25 years, they won't be able to, the solar company won't be able to sell and build houses or anything there. It's still a bog.
Cranberry bogs are still allowed under the zoning and under the state law now.
Okay.
And that's why they changed it. My concern was, yeah, they'll be growing cranberries, but how are we going to grow?
Right, right.
But the way they designed these, supposedly, the light will still get underneath and the plants will still be able to grow. I don't think there'll be as many plants
Right.
personally, but I think, shade is shade. I don't know how the sun's going to hit it, but in the long run, I think, first of all, it's a big win for us. $4 million in 20 years is a lot of money for this town. And we're very excited about that. Very much.
Great.
I'd
Thank you.
like to recognize that Mr. Clary has now joined us.
I was shaving.
We can tell.
I took my excuse, too.
All right, we'll go on to cost for substitutes.
So in the second packet that you have, there's a number of handouts, but the first one starts with substitute employee cost. I just wanted to bring this up as one of these line items in the school department that never gets a lot of attention and discussion, but can be a significant issue for us. So this is the area where long-term substitutes for medical coverage of personnel who may in fact still be earning their salary while we're also covering that position with a secondary salary, which could be $80 a day, $100 a day, or in areas of need, an actual per diem that I try to negotiate different from the contract. These are non-union positions as well. And then you have the regular substitute cost for us, which is $80 a day. Remember that our associations range between 12 and 15, and even the regular employees, 12 and 15 sick days, which they can accrue. Administrators, there's also vacation time. They do not have buybacks, including the superintendent. And then you have the non-union personnel and union personnel, which also have all contracts that allow for sick time. Vacation time in a couple of contracts that is just actually built into their salary. It's not vacation time that they can actually use. So what you're really seeing here is 2 line items, or 3 line items: maternity leaves, health leaves, either individual sick day, where you need a coverage, which would come from the regular substitute line, or long-term, which would come from the long-term line. And then the third one would be personal days, which would come from regular substitute. So regular substitute, right now we're projecting potentially about a $30,000 to $40,000 increase from last year based on our projections. So that means we're going to have to dig into our budget to hopefully try to find that. But this is a perfect example of what I would call the school department's overtime line item. I think we have to have some discussions in the future about what is the best way to allocate these funds. Is it to actually project it out now, or is it to take a look at something that comes into the budget later where we have a better projection? Because we start the school year with this line item, and it's a significant line item, as you can see, at $542,000. It's not pennies. We do not have what I would call your somewhat traditional incentive clauses for not using. The school department a number of years ago, starting with employees after '07, eliminated the buybacks. That's a big difference between your side and our side. In return, there were other things that were put on the table. I think Mr. Savas was part of that negotiations back then. So over the next 10, 12 years, you're going to see a lot of those buybacks, which are not separate as an article for us. They're in our operational budget versus the town side. They're a special article that pays out later. Those are part of it. So when we have a retirement, for example, which they don't have to notify us until the day before school ends if they want to, we still have to find those funds in that operational budget. And so that's, and we don't project that. Every once in a while, we might know someone who comes to us in September and says, I'm retiring in June, and we'll just automatically just put that to the side. But maternity leaves are very special to us because we are more of a female-oriented workforce than I think any department may be on your side. And two, that's a projection where the superintendent loves to project things, but I just can't really project maternity leave. I'm not involved in that process at all. So thank God.
Wouldn't touch that one.
So the issue becomes, I've had years here, as final years, just to give you some numbers, I've had years where we've had 6 to 7, and I've had years of 13 and 14. So think about an 8-week, 6 to 8 week leave, predominantly 8-week. FMLA kicks in with documentation, and that person has the sick day, predominantly another 4 weeks of paid time while we're also paying on the other side. And I'm okay with that. I understand that. I'm pro-child and family, but we can't predict it. And my concern is that when this number starts to become negative, I've got to take from another account. I don't have a place to go. And so that's an area of concern going forward because our staff is getting younger. And as our staff gets younger, that means more and more folks taking some of the time. Where there's a cost benefit and we throw money into this is when we have a teacher scheduled to be here for the year, goes out late in the year for maternity leave, and then says, I'd like to take a leave of absence. That gives me almost somewhere between a third, I'd say 30% and 40% of that person's salary goes right into this line item to offset, because now I'm not paying that person, I'm just paying a long-term sub for the year. So that's how we make up the difference, is we kick it into this line item. Unfortunately, this year is not going to be one of those years as we're projecting out where we're going to see a lot of that. Most of our folks are coming back. They're leaving for the 8-week maternity, or in a couple of situations, we've had some folks with 6, 8, 9 weeks out for health issues, severe health issues. And that's a good thing that they're coming back, and then we have the traditional personal days. I did run an internal, for the committee also to know, I ran an internal report in the fall on our attendance rate, and our attendance rate continues to fall right around that 94-95% daily rate. We should be right around that 95% daily rate daily for all of our staff, and that encompasses all of our staff, including if I'm out, as part of the calculation. So that's a good thing. We know that our staff isn't overusing, but also in our field, the second part that's really important with sick days is that our sick day account also calls for family sick day. So potentially, if my daughter is sick, for example, I might take a family sick day as part of my day. In my case, you don't need a substitute, but in the case of a teacher, you would need that substitute. And so if you have a lot of young families giving birth on staff, regardless if it's male or female, what you see is a spike in the numbers of folks taking time off because children are sick. A lot of our couples, I know for a fact, try to alternate as much as they can, but we're probably a better industry for that alternating than maybe the private sector is in terms of taking time off because of a family sickness. So this is just an allocation of funds for you to know that is very difficult for us to keep track of, and we are running about $40,000 higher than we have in the last 2 years.
I have a question, Cody. I read recently an article about the whack-out substitute teachers. Is that something you guys are bringing into?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Mr. Kibble, I was wondering if you were free tomorrow.
You wouldn't want me in there.
Yes, we increased our rate a year and a half ago to $80. I created an internal rate system for long-term subs, for anybody who's going to have the responsibility of entering grades, doing grades, being at the parent conferences and all of that, for a period of 6 weeks or greater at $100 more a day. The issue that, and then the third part would be anybody who's out for the year is not in the teacher's contract, they're in a separate contract, they get 50% of the sick time and 50% of the personal time. So that would be, for example, an English teacher leaves for the year to look at another career, and we replace that person at $40,000 instead of $80,000. The biggest negative that we see is that the economy is very good. So our biggest issue is currently, we just tried to create, we cannot find a crossing guard for the morning. I'm sure some of you maybe even got a phone call from somebody about where's the crossing guard. So our crossing guard left, retired, is gone. We've been posting, we've actually gone to the senior center physically to say, is there only one here? We'd like to pick up a couple of bucks. We were willing to even negotiate a higher salary if needed. Nothing. Finally, what we did is we came up with a creative way, a substitute line, where someone, instead of being a typical $80 a day, we're going to pay them, I think it's $100 or $110. They're going to be a crossing guard for 30 minutes in the morning, and then go right into the classroom to substitute for the day. So it's no new money. It's not adding a cost, because we would probably be calling a substitute. Likelihood that there's no one out for the day is probably the first day of school and the last day of school. We actually just got a recommendation for the middle school. But that also leads to another discussion, which is how do we get the flashing lights that Wheaton has outside of the Yale, the middle school, and the JCS? Those lights work. They work, they're bright. Our offices in town are awesome at catching people who don't adhere to those lights. Everybody stops at those lights, and that's all we would need, is those types of lights put up in those 3 locations. And especially our older students hitting a button and then crossing the street if they're a walker. And we wouldn't need anyone there, so that's one idea. The other idea that goes along with that is the topic of, we've worked with Chief Clark on trying to, while an officer may be free to help out, but we can't count on that. And he can't count on that, and he's been very gracious to say, I really don't want to give you a 4-hour detail. Which would be unmanageable for us. In the afternoon, we're okay. It's in the morning that we're having an issue. So we resolved a little bit of that issue, with the biggest issue being at the middle school. But if there's any help we could have between the 2 boards on asking the state about how to go about that, it'd be great.
I can answer some of that. How do you answer?
I've been the chairman for the Housing Authority for the last 20 years. And we've been trying to get a light there for forever, as far as I've been on the board, because of people crossing to go across the street to do business. We approached the state, sent a letter to them, got approval, which we didn't think we were going to get approval. We got approval from them. We paid for it. We bought the system. It's not cheap, but it's maintained by, it's only a couple companies in the state of Massachusetts that can work on them. You can actually fix them if you need to go to school for a couple hours to learn on computer boards and that. We've had some issues with them. But it's getting better, but like I said, it can be done. You just send a letter to the state.
Once we pay for it, we checked into it to find out what we had to do in front of the school, in front of the young. And the answer we got is, it is state highway, so we have to get permission from the state to put it in, but they're existing anyway. In some cases, they're pre-existing, nothing here, the further down they are. We'd have to get permission. There'd be two phases to it. One would be to replace the existing ones, and then the additional ones would have to be addressed separately. But we can do it, but we have to pay for it. The state will not pay for it.
So who paid for the ones that by Wheaton? Wheaton College paid for
We paid
those?
for those, yeah.
Okay. So
We
when are you
paid-
putting yours in by the Housing Authority?
Last year.
Last year?
Yeah, we probably
Right
get
across from Speedway.
Yeah, no, I know, but so the one by the high school, we could change to the one that flashes, not just the red stop.
We can get
Correct.
permission from the state
Yeah.
highway to do that.
Okay.
And Wheaton College is working on theirs right now down by the Clark Building.
Yeah.
They have the one way.
Yes.
We stop and they still hit the button anyway. We sit there for 10 minutes waiting.
Right.
They're working on that one too, and there's a bit of a conflict between the town and the college as to who really owns it.
Right.
But it's our understanding that the college was the one that we originally had to put in. So we're working with them on that, but we should work together to, first of all, determine how much it's going to cost, and then find out what the state will allow us to do, what not allow us to do. But they work far better than the old style.
Oh,
That's when we do better.
Well, definitely, that's why I'm thinking by the high school and the one at the college too. I mean, it just, the one with the flashing, I think, works better. And like the housing authority, it was dangerous because some of those people are in wheelchairs trying to cross. And just like outside of here, you know, kids are trying to cross and people are passing on the right if somebody's taking a left. I mean, it's a matter of time before somebody, you know, gets really hurt. So is that something that we have to send a letter to the state or the board of select, or the,
We have to work,
Yeah.
we can work together.
Okay.
There's no question, we can have the managers file, send the joint letter and ask for consideration on how to do it.
okay, yeah, especially if you guys already sent one, maybe we can just kind of,
I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna be the quickest thing for us to do it, ask them to do it. You know, back in '98, when they built the school, we asked them to put that in there, and they said there wasn't enough foot traffic to warrant a light. So, and to get them to redo this again, and I'm sure they're gonna want us to do a study, engineering, pay for all this cost before they
Right.
even approach, which years down the road. before
Yeah.
they even take place. To ask for a letter to be put it on the state road, I think is gonna be a lot quicker. Like, it took us a couple months, I think we got approved. So
Right.
it wasn't a long time.
okay.
Well, at the very least, in the meantime, can we put one of those cones out that says it's state law to stop for someone in the crossing guard? I know they used to have one down at Wheaton, I haven't seen it in a while there.
Because they keep running them over.
Well, is it something that we could put at least in the beginning of school and at the end of school, like?
Well, it's something
It's
that-
only gonna help for so long, because once they see it a few times, then it's like they don't even see it and they go through, but
Yeah.
anything that can help for
It's
any
actually
of them.
something with
I
the
think
new
it's
crossing
worth
guard
it.
situation that we could easily just have the person just walk it out and leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, throw a couple out there in the middle of the street while they're there.
Right.
Right.
Now it's carrying back.
Right,
Remember, the crossing guards for us are there for two reasons. The first reason, the major reason is students, and the second one is the buses coming out, so that they flow. It stops the traffic, so.
Yeah, because I mean, I would think foot traffic it's not as big of an issue at JCS or at the Yale, but here, because the secondary issue that we're hearing from parents is parents are dropping off at St. Mary's and they're trying to hook across the street.
right.
But, I mean, if you're on this side of town, you can come up Power Street, you can drop them off behind the cemetery, they can cut right through. And then you can just scoot down 123 and avoid coming down this way.
I did
So
send
that's
out
the other
a
issue.
message this week asking parents not to do that because I'm concerned about the safety. I'm very clear that I have a full responsibility to have someone there, but they're actually illegally dropping off in an area where they shouldn't, so the responsibility, in my opinion, belongs to the parents, not to me. And I made that pretty clear in my commentary that it would be nice to, I know it stinks to come in as someone who drops someone off at the middle school every once in a while. It's not easy, I get it, but it's safe, or safer.
It kind of leads us into another conversation that's on our list, and that's the demolition of the Campbell House. We are in the process of getting bids to take down the house and the barn. Just a brief history, we hired a company to come in and assess the house. Supposedly, it's the second oldest house in the county, in Bristol County. But unfortunately, when we had a historical company come in and check it out, they determined anything of historical value no longer exists in the building. And it's really been updated and modified. The structure underneath is probably the only original components of the building. And I'm told that the boards are pretty petrified. You could drive a nail into them if you wanted to. It's a very, very strong, sound building under it, but it's not, there's no historical value whatsoever. So the Board of Selectmen sent a letter to the Norton Historical Society and asked them for determination whether or not they wanted to, both grant money or try to find a way to save it. And they really have no interest in it. So the building's coming down, both of them would be coming down. That opens up a different conversation we should have about traffic coming in and out of the middle school. The Board of Selectmen controlled, when we built this years ago, and I was on the land acquisition committee at the time we found this, for whatever reason, for the SBA program, this became school property, but the property up front still is retained under the Board of Selectmen. Not to say it can't be transferred, it probably should be at some point. But the thought I have is once we take it down, that opens up a different opportunity for you guys to come and have a second egress into the property. I know you're talking about widening yours now. Perhaps we should stop and take another look at this, visualize that building, those buildings not being there. The playground has to stay, the Tricentennial Park has to stay, but everything else is gone. And I kind of visualize that as another way in and out. Could be a drop-off section, could be a place where people could drop their kids off, but also additional parking. For this particular school, but I understand you do have some issues at times with parking on the property here, so again, we need to work out some kind of have an open dialogue about how to do this. The land's gonna sit there and do nothing. So obviously, if the school committee has superintendent has something, a use for it, we need to look at it. But before we spend any more money, it might be in our best interest to look at hiring a traffic engineer and just have him look at it and say, how can we change the whole way we come in and out of this property? And perhaps it could be one way in and one way out. I don't know. I don't know how that would work. But I'm not an engineer, so I'm not pretend to be one. But I think it's important that before we spend any more money or any other improvements, including lights, walkways or whatever, that we take the whole thing and look at it and figure out how we can make this work better for us. Driving in tonight, I came to the right, I looked to my left, and I said, how much would it take to be able to go to the right, come back out the left? I mean, it would make it a lot easier. I know Reed and I have had a conversation about you guys are gonna need some kind of facility for storage of your equipment at some point. That might be encompassed into that, or we take land that would be used for that, use it behind the building, and we put parking up front. If we can open up additional parking spaces, perhaps you guys can find another spot to put a small metal building or something that you might need to store your equipment.
Bob, you also taking down the little, so you've got the barn in the back, the house, and then there's that little brown,
Everything will come down.
okay, because somebody asked me, because they store stuff in there.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find another spot for that.
Yeah, so, because I think too, opening up some parking for that playground. I know when I was
Yeah.
doing park and rec, parking a bit tough in there sometimes, because people really do use that playground a lot. So I think having more parking is helpful to be able to go there, but I think it's worth looking at for sure.
Yeah, and the parking that goes on there goes on during the school day, not before or after the
Right.
school
Yeah.
day.
Right,
So there is a potential for, as you said, Bob, somebody who's got that engineering mindset of what that could look like,
Yeah.
to have that be, I mean, what we really need is we need this side of town to be coming in and exiting, while this side of town can come in or can be exiting. And if we could do that, we would definitely pick up some spots, and I would put anything to do with our equipment and housing as a secondary item, because I think there's further discussion we can probably have with you folks on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't spend any more money at this point and
Agreed.
take a look at that. It's bigger than it looks, it's about an acre.
yeah.
So it's a lot bigger than, if you actually stop, which I did tonight, kind of to my left, I'm surprised how far away the buildings are from the entranceway that you have now. So I think it's really a project we need to combine our resources on, and see what we can do. You know, with the assistance of the highway department, we might be able to come up with some creative ways to make that all happen. If we can use Chapter 90 funding, which is highway funding, maybe we could use some of that. Maybe there's a grant out there, I don't know. I don't know what's out there, but I think we need to take that building down. It has been condemned by our building inspector. We are required to take that down probably within the next month or two. So it has to come down to begin with. Once it comes down, you're gonna see that big void out front, and say, okay, now what are we gonna do? Because there's a lot of land there.
So in the next, oh, sorry.
No, I was just piggybacking, I mean, the last thing we want is people exiting this building through an area being used by somebody else. Like, we don't want to just, here's your roadway to go right past all these kids playing in the playground, because, I mean, my kids are older now, but my kids were smart enough that they could push the little button and walk out. So the last thing we want is to have, you know, a nicer way to leave this area, but not cause harm to somebody that's using another part of the town,
So
so.
again, you'd have parking near the playground,
Yeah.
and the person kind of parking
Yeah.
to that side, and you'd have right of way out, and have perhaps even more parking on the left. You know.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, I've always said, even if you can come down and go to the right, because I'm on this side of town, so, I mean, coming up to cross to the left, I'm like, I'll just go around. You know, so I mean, but you got the pole that's right there that would cause a headache too.
And I think in today's world, too, you need a second egress. You have to have another way to get in and out of these places, because the world's gone nutty, and we definitely need to have the ability to get emergency equipment in and out of facilities like this real fast, and at the same time, get people out of here as fast as we can too. So I think it's just something we need to.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other, so you think in the next couple of months that will come down? Because it says here you're looking for funding in the
We
spring.
have to figure out how
town
to pay
meeting.
for it.
Yeah,
We got to figure out where the money's going to come from.
okay.
If we can't come up with the money right away, we may have to
Go to the spring.
wait
town
until
meeting.
May town meeting and get the appropriation.
Okay.
I have no idea what's going to cost.
So maybe in the meantime, we can at least look into, okay. All right, anything else on that? All right. So I think it's back to us now. Special education?
So, in general, unlike, I don't even like saying it out loud, last year we were already discussing some potential needs of transfers in the spring town meeting. We're not at that point at all. We're in line, but we continue to see the transfer of students into the district after the fiscal year continues to be an area that is concerning because it's not budgeted after the May town meeting. We appreciate very much that the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee supported the funding in the May town meeting because of the financial situation we were in last year, which was a very statewide unique year, to be quite honest. At this point, we're stable, for lack of a better word, but at any point, that can become something that becomes problematic. We do not have an article for the town meeting. I don't know if that's something that we should always think about doing, just for the sake of a surprise that happens after the articles are due, so that you don't have to call a special town meeting in June or in order to pay something that we can't substantiate or find the funding for. The concern that we have is under another topic, under social and emotional learning, where we're seeing some of our biggest increases in the needs of students. So this would be students not necessarily on an educational plan, who move to an educational plan because of the social and emotional issues, hospitalization issues, or on the other side of it, the concern that we have, you'll see in the spring when I present our numbers that we've done a great job in moving towards our public collaboratives, which are, we believe, educationally sound and financially better than going to some of the private out-of-district costs. You'll see actually our chart shows a dip on how that's actually helped our long-term costs, and these would be for students who potentially are going to be out of district all the way through graduation and potentially even beyond. But the concern is that the spaces at collaboratives for students is getting smaller and smaller every day. We belong to BICO. That's 18 different school systems. They're at full capacity. They're saying, I'm sorry, not even the members. We belong to Reed's with some of their programming, not only the students that are here, but our students for alternative behavioral needs. And they're not full, but it's a program also that's further away and so on and so forth and very specific. So one of the things we're trying to establish is what's the next programs. You'll see in our budget, I believe, and Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, moving to the Yell is another specialized program, potentially because of, and I say potentially only because we're looking at the students and do they need it. So this would now give us in Norton, really for the first time, literally pre-K to 12 instruction in our specialized programming. Now that doesn't mean child doesn't still go out of district, because remember, it's the district family making a decision. But I'm pretty happy to say that we're, through Jean's work and her colleagues, we're able to fly that through, if you will, where every single year we have a lot of transitions. A lot of our parents worry about these transitions because we go from a pre-K3 school, then we move 4-5. That's not a traditional model. Then we move again, then we move again. And so in the past, we haven't necessarily had these transitional programs go along. This year, for example, we have a teacher that came with the students from the JCS to the Yale, and it's been very successful. But at what point do we have do those transitions include other professionals working with students? It's very difficult to be a teacher who's going to stay with the same student for 8, 9, 10 years. It doesn't work. And, you know, it just doesn't work. As much as the teacher can be awesome, it's not good for either party, because the child needs to grow and expand their ability to work with others and learn from others, and also another teacher providing that resource for them. So those are the concerns going forward. In terms of the state budget, you're hearing a lot around the cost of healthcare and special education with the foundation formula. It's not directly connected to this, but if you give me just 1 minute of time to connect it to all of this, there are 4 recommendations within the Foundation Review Committee study. 2 of those recommendations will give the town of Norton exactly $0 increases. So I've made it very clear that it's the other 2 options, which comes to $600,000 in yearly increase from the state. So I just want us to sit where we are today and say, if Norton's public schools had $600,000, where would we be, right? If we take a look at the cost that we had last year, where we had to go back into stabilization, where would we potentially be? So we really want to push that, although the Foundation Review Committee's recommendations are excellent, that there are 2 recommendations that are good for all students in all districts throughout the state. And there are 2 recommendations within the formula, 4 different recommendations, 2 formulas within those recommendations that give us nothing. And by the way, that includes 150 other school districts. So we're not the only ones. The lawsuit discussion that's taking place revolves around counting every student. So what does that mean? So that means every student within minority, special education services, all of that stuff, that they're totally counted throughout the formula process. The key here for everybody to to really understand is that we don't need another, quote, let's give a little bit more for each student. I've been here for 6 years. Your total increase from the state in 6 years is $300,000. Okay? Total. Because we've been getting anywhere between $25 and $50 per student, and that's it. You remember last year was a celebration of how we got $75,000. Okay? It just doesn't, it doesn't even come close to paying for anything. So it's really, really important, and I would ask the board to continue, and I thank you, Bob, because you've been key on this, on just making sure the board is aware of sending out that second letter after I send out the first letter on behalf of the committee in my office. Just keep bombarding our 2 very active representatives and 1 very active senator, regardless of party. We just keep saying to them, you cannot vote on anything else except the 2 models that provide communities like Norton its fair shake of the pie. So I urge you, because that formula is very important to 2 topics: healthcare costs and special education. And those, as you know, are our 2 biggest pieces of our pie when it comes to required spending within the school budget, or I should say the town budget. So that's kind of an update on special education and where we are right now.
On election scheduling, I have a note here from Mike. Town clerk has closed the possibility of trying to use St. Mary's across the street for the next election, and determined that it really isn't adequate for that purpose. The Norton High School is still by far the best venue and does meet election criteria. It is suggested that maybe the school committee could consider on election day scheduling a professional working day to keep down some of the traffic. Because I think we remember the last one. There was a fiasco out there trying to get people out of the Yale and high school property. It was a total mess. The town was totally messed up. And also, just to let you know, that we did look into the possibility of trying to move the next election, and we can't because it's too far into the year, and the state will not allow us to do so. We can talk about the need for a new town hall and a new common area and all this stuff. At some point, we need to talk about that, but in the meantime, the only building we really have that we can use that works for us is the high school. And I guess the town manager's asking, and the town clerk's asking if we could explore the possibility of a professional day that particular day to try to soften the blow, so to speak, so we're not throw it screwing up the town again like we did during the last election.
So there's a couple of different responses on that, right? The first one is, we don't necessarily disagree, but we're also thinking K to 8, K to 12, not just high school. We've been putting out 2-year calendars for the last few years as a way to support families and kind of just get the calendars out there early. So we moved our PD day from the typical November election, except on presidential election years, to actual, the first 2 days of the school year, non-student days, which is the Tuesday and Wednesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of, before Labor Day. With the TPC going off and on or off, or whatever that final is going to be, there may be another look at our calendar, which would cause, the discussion that we always have, which is, do we start before Labor Day? The issue for me is not the presidential election in November. The issue for me is, how many elections do we have? Right? I mean, this past year we had 4, right? We had special elections in the fall, we had special elections in June, primaries in the fall, that last year, then the election in November, then a town election. Some years we have the town election and then a separate ballot question. So are we going to be closing the high school every single time that happens? That's 3 to 5 days of extending the school year for them. Not a problem for me. I probably would not extend the school day for K to 8. I'd keep them on their same schedule. And the high school would just have a longer school year. The only other alternative that we have, and the reason why the high school has been such a concern specifically to the staff, is the high school gym is it's an internal facility, not an external facility. The only solid external facility that we think we have is actually in this building, because there's a single ADA compliant entrance in and out. There's access for the workers for the bathroom only through the cafeteria to the front door, and it eliminates all access to the building. Now, I'm not suggesting that I'm recommending that to the school committee tonight, because to be quite honest, I'm still in talks with the high school. It does cause some traffic flows, but remember, this building doesn't currently start until after 8 o'clock, not at 7:15 and 7:30, which is where we have the height of traffic on 123. And then the second part is, although this only has one exit, the only big concern would be in the afternoon. Because after school, there's limited sports and activities, there are, but it's such a smaller number of kids. You're not having 150 to 200 kids going at school like you do at the high school, activities and sports. So, and I have to tell you that I've never worked with a better town clerk in all my years as a superintendent. She's fantastic, she's very flexible, she communicates with us. Kudos to you folks for the person that you hired. But we would want to have further discussions with the town on this building potentially becoming a thought.
And the board's selectmen determine whether the town meeting is going to be held.
Right.
And honestly, I don't care if it's being held, what school is being held at. Unfortunately, the only building we have that are capable of handling that kind of traffic are the schools. And town hall can't handle it. And, so we're going to come up with another plan. We looked at Wheaton College, we've looked at St. Mary's in the past.
Yep.
And there are so many restrictions, but again, getting back to another way out of here, that's yet another example of why we probably should be taking another look at the property here, because we could, this building was designed so that end of the building, you can use it anytime you want.
Right.
You don't have to come into this building.
Right.
That was the way that we designed it way back when. So it makes perfect sense to use this building. And so, after this election, maybe next April, we should be looking at, maybe this should be the place to go. And we should have some conversation about that and stay away from the high school. The high school area, that section of town is such a mess to begin with.
Yeah, and the concern is that we also have, my understanding is some potential businesses coming in around the Yale School with a potential right-hand or left-hand turn into a potential, I won't say what type of business, but what I'm hearing, I've already made myself clear or communicated to the town planner that I think an engineering traffic study needs to take place as part of that, because we have concerns about what that's going to mean into the flow of traffic, into that only one way in, one way out. And even with the work, Bob, that you've done for us in continuing to work for that secondary bus in and out exit only, it's still only one place in and out. We don't have students parking at Norton Middle School. Check. We do at the high school. Huge issue. I would actually say, with all due respect to my peers, my colleagues at the high school, the biggest issue. I mean, And having 4 armed police officers at a high school makes me feel pretty comfortable. Really does, with all due respect to my colleagues. However, since I'm not there, and anxiety levels and so on and so forth that can happen with staff and children, my biggest concern is actually the parking lot, where it's just difficult. And you can, I could put 20 police officers out in the parking lot, and still be a problem. Because if you look at that parking lot, it's not a good flow parking lot. Right, and we have a sign right before the auditorium that says one way, and everybody still comes that way on election day to try to find a parking spot. So we do think that there's significant positives to this building. Again, I do think that the school committee and your decision, not mine, number one, and number two, also wanting to talk to my staff. I don't want my K-8 staff or my middle school staff to think I'm just pawning it back on them. I want to be able to provide them rationale and reasoning if in fact that's the way we decide to go.
So this year, we're going to have to hold our April elections at the high school. They're just going to have no choice.
Yeah, and we have some recommendations for the town clerk as it pertains to just helping out with trying to see if we can, typically your town elections, unless there's that O word involved, it's not a whole lot of turnout. I don't think any of us on my side, I know Lucia did, anticipated that it would be as crazy as it was in the fall, and I think it was mostly about ballot questions more so than it was anything else. But for the presidential elections, we've had a history of always being closed on presidential election day, and we will continue to recommend that on those years. It's just that I think that we can't just talk about November. We have to talk about September primaries, special elections anyway during the year. I mean, this year, we had a primary on the first day of school because the state had to move it because of the religious holidays. And that wasn't announced until June. So, if we want to do this right, I think we just have to say, what's the best place? Let's use that there. We don't have yes, we have parent traffic coming in, but we also have a lot of students on buses. And so it's an easier traffic flow in the morning and afternoon.
Well, I think the other thing too is the buses are on this end and any election traffic would be on this end. But my concern would be is coming up off of 123 and you have people trying to turn left to go vote and you have buses going this way, you'd almost need someone to direct traffic right at the point of the
Yeah,
market.
you would have to.
So for me, I was stuck in that traffic just like everybody else. I actually said to the town clerk, when I pulled in, and there wasn't an officer out on 123, and I was in the school at 7:20. Like, he wasn't even there yet. So I'm like, the problem with every election is you have kids that drive, you have staff that come in there, you have, all the voters that come in there, you have the buses coming in there. It's a perfect storm of a disaster.
We do have some thoughts for the spring, recognizing, talking to the town clerk, that we would probably not be able to move it, and that is the potential, Lady and I have been talking about moving our student parking lot to the Yelp for the day, and allowing for our driving students to actually leave earlier in the day. So maybe they would leave at maybe 1:45 instead of 2 o'clock, instead of 2:00, whatever it is that day. So that'd be that 20-minute reprieve, so that the only thing that would be coming out of the high school would be students in the buses, parent pickup, and then 15 minutes later the staff. So that's one scenario that we're working on because we can, for the day, just move most of our Yale staff to the back of the Yale.
I feel like, in the midterm, I think was an outlier. I feel like we're trying to solve for a problem that doesn't really occur in the line, quite frankly. I don't know that the general elections that are held in this town are as well attended as that last one was. So
Agreed.
I'm all for finding the right building, the right place, et cetera. I just don't know if this is something that's
The
a critical issue right now.
The biggest issue that comes from the high school staff, and it's a good argument, I have to give it to them, I never thought of it this way, to be quite honest, but that gym is in the core of the building. And so what happens is you've got, once you're in the gym, you've got 4 exits. And literally, you're talking, you have to almost put 4 police officers, one at every exit, and say, I'm sorry, you can't go this way, that's the way you have to go. Then you step out, and you've got an exit this way, you need another officer there, and then you gotta stop from the staircase, because the only way to get to the nurse during the day is to utilize that staircase, and our nurse's office does get visited. So that's the issue, is that it's in the center of the building, not in the external part of the building. And when and I don't know that much about what the building used to look like, but I think that the cafeteria wasn't where it is right now.
Cafeteria was on the other side.
Was on the other side, so I don't, what was on the other side of the gym? Was it? It was the locker
Rooms were-
rooms. So it did give you potentially straight exit out and straight exit in, potentially. Now it doesn't, you have to go through yet another, it's kind of odd to see, it's not odd, it's different to see a cafeteria right next to a gym in a high school. So, so close to each other. And in this case, our gym is also internal.
And the cafeteria back then, before the 2011 renovation,
it's
was on
good to
the
have the
other side of the
discussion.
building.
For it, because I think we need to, it did happen, but realistically, our elections, even when there is an override, we get 30-something% of people who come out to vote. I don't know what this year was, do you guys know? It was a lot, I mean, it had to have been.
So was 7,000 voters.
Yeah, it had to have.
7,800, I think it was.
I think
Some of those were early.
Oh, that's right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I've gone
Early ones for
to
the-
every election since I've lived in this town. And this is the first time, I go at night because I can't get there during the day.
Right.
This is the first time at night I had to wait in a short line, but I did have to wait.
Right.
But at the same time, every single one of us is an elected official, and we've all seen our election results. Let's be honest, I mean, not one of us has probably gotten 1,000 votes a year. I mean, it just doesn't happen, so.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Mike did, yeah.
Mike
just to
did.
clarify.
Well, it was either Mike or
Because I voted
Blank.
7 times for it.
I bet you Blank beat you, though.
You did.
See, I think that's the issue
Back in the
is,
days when the elections were held at the Yale School, back in the old days.
so I think we have to be, clarify what we're discussing is, we're not necessarily discussing the elections themselves. It's, there's people that aren't normally in the schools, now in the schools, and it's just a bad location to have an election. Because there's wanderers and there's this and there's that, and I think we're not objecting to having an election anywhere, but it's a disruption of the schools to a point to have, people that aren't normally. So I think if we have a more controlled environment, like ideally, I remember as a kid, we had the cafeteria at the front, and the gym was down one end. You had to take your tray and go eat in the gym on election day. So not that we can do that, but
Yeah,
I think it's just having a location that's conducive to traffic in, traffic out. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily, the location or the numbers or anything like that. It's, the election has to happen either way.
Right.
Our workers are still there, you're still gonna have traffic, you're still gonna have all these details, but maybe in a more controlled environment, maybe you save a little money on the details.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that. At the same time, I mean, I was subject to the hyperbole and hysteria as well. And I think some of these problems are fairly easily solvable. I don't know how many wanderers realistically we had. And at the same time, I don't think anyone had probably nefarious intent. So again, I just feel like we're spending a lot of time trying to solve for tips and tails. It's, the meat of our elections happens here. I don't know if we should spend a ton of time solving for something that happens way down here.
I think
That's all I'm saying.
part of the problem is that, and now I can't speak for the board, but I believe the board as well as the school committee had some knowledge that it was going to be moving away from the schools. And then, unfortunately for Lucia, as the town clerk, she got a curveball. And she had to deal with the curveball right away. It was a meeting actually that we were at, that she was in front of you folks, and you folks actually said, well, wait a minute, what happened to the, and we had to act on it. Well, by the time that happened, the communication from everybody was already out with, hey, we don't have to worry about the election, it's going somewhere else, and then it had a backtrack. That caused, I think, more stress than it needed to. We tried to handle it. I'll take the blame for it that I didn't handle it well enough, but the fact of the matter is, we have some thoughts and ideas for the upcoming April that we think will help, because we don't think the turnouts are going to be as high. And two, we have some thoughts in discussing between the two boards in the town clerk's office and myself on, let's look at another option, try it once, see if it works. Presidential elections is a no-brainer for us. We've always kept closed just simply because, you can typically expect 70 to 80% turnout.
I'm
not sure.
just from believing that day has to come when we have one location that we have the elections in, so we're not accused of not being transparent. People
Right.
don't know where they're going. We had people going to the Yale for a long time after we were in high school. Well, when did you do that? Well, 2 years ago. The point of the matter is, we need to have, in order for it to be smooth for everyone, we have to have a location that we stay at. I don't care where it is. In fact, personally, I don't think it's my decision. It's your buildings. You guys need to tell us what works best for you guys. And we'll follow through on it, we'll make it happen. But I don't want to tell you guys what school I want to use, because I think you guys have a better understanding of how these buildings work than I do. But we're gonna have to figure out a way to make it work until we can come up with another plan, again, in the future.
Agreed. All right, ready to move on? I think that was you guys with the election schedule, so I can go to transportation next.
So I wanted,
Yeah, the other thing we wanted to talk about before we follow up the elections is, we made a big mistake. My mother always telling me.
Thanks, Mary.
I'm being scolded by the Springtown election, the annual town meeting, we always have the second Monday of May. That's how our charter is established now. We've been known to move it here and there, and again, getting back to my previous point, when you start moving things around, people get confused and they get angry and they say, oh, you're trying to mind boggle us here somehow. You know how it is. You guys are in the same seat I am, so you understand how it works. Our town moderator indicated that he had an opportunity to go away for 2.5 weeks with his lovely wife in the spring. And he warned us way back in July that he would not be around the second Monday of May. So May 13th, he will not be around. May 14th, he will be back. He's asked us to consider moving, and the board can do this, to move the town meeting until Wednesday instead of Monday. What happens? What happens is, if we don't, then we have to appoint a special moderator for the event and determine how that's all gonna have to work out. Or second, obviously, the second option, as I indicated, is to move the whole meeting until Wednesday. We're not sure what to do yet. We just found out that in his defense, he did tell us. In my old age, I forgot it. And I think everyone else did too. So that's just something maybe we can talk about in a couple of weeks. And maybe you guys have some thoughts on how to handle this. But I'm always afraid to move something, because if I move it, I feel like people are going to find out that we moved it and they weren't aware of it. And they're going to show up on a Monday night, we're not going to be there, that kind of stuff. So it's something we have to kick around a bit, but maybe on that joint meeting in 2 weeks, we'll again discuss that.
we have Mike books the Monday, Wednesday of that week. So both the 13th and the 15th are booked. I don't see why the 14th would be a problem for the school department. But the 15th?
Yeah.
The 15th's already booked. It would be potentially adding the 14th instead.
But it could be the 15th and then the following Monday, if we needed.
And I'm sure we can probably be fine with that. I can't, it's still wells away from graduation. That's nothing else. If we're notified now that there's nothing that we couldn't potentially move.
Okay, well, we'll do some more research on that, figure out how to handle this.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay, back to transportation.
So on transportation, I gave you on the handout as well. This is, you know, this is always a hot topic where no matter what I say, nobody believes me. So this is a January 10th, 2019 updated expense line for transportation. How much money has been taken in, what our total costs are. So I just wanted to take a look at the projected 2019 appropriation of $787,478 with a revolving of $191,830. That $191,830 comes from the ridership numbers that you see below. And you'll see a significant decrease in athletics thanks to some of our work that we've been doing by trying to use our own transportation so that there's no added costs. So we see some savings in that area. At $1,065,377, we're about $10,000 less than last year, but that's all due, as you can see, from athletics, because actually regular appropriations is up $37,000, and we actually collected less money in fees. What's important here is when you look at totally registered riders, 1,529, of which 954 are K-6 registered riders, of which another 575 are 7 to 12 riders. So that's the section where we are not required by law to put children on buses. And then the third part is the K-6, 2 more miles. Those students do not pay a fee. So we have 644 students at no fee, and then under the 575, we have students who are fee and free and reduced lunch do not pay a fee. And then when you go back to the K-6 registered, the difference between the 644 and the 954 is that we have another roughly 300 students in K-6 who are under 2 miles who pay the fee because they're under 2 miles. So that's how the system works in terms of the numbers. We currently have $7,435 worth of payment plans. These are situations where the families are having a hard time paying, and then they've said, you know, can I pay per month? As you know, we had a little bit of an issue in the fall. We're actually going to change the process. But the real discussion that I wanted to have is the continuation of us, and by us I mean the town, not necessarily the school department. And if you take out, even if you even keep the athletics, it's $1 million line item that's growing every year. And so one of the options that the school committee has asked us to take a look at is bring transportation in internal. What would that cost? What would it look like? There is significant savings on our side, but there's some cost to your side. And so when you add the two together, what does that mean? It still probably means some type of a savings, especially if you're leasing transportation. The concern that we have is hiring bus drivers, becoming our own fleet. And the second would be potentially anyone over 20 hours having to be provided health care at a cost, as you know, of $19,000, $20,000 family plan per person. So what would that projection look like in terms of the people that we have, that we've utilized? This is a third party. This is a procurement process. This is a 3-year contract. We saved $56,000 in the tiered system because we eliminated a tier by putting grades 4 and 5 with 6, 7, and 8 all in the same bus. It had some rough patches early on, but it's pretty much streamlined. Those patches are typically have to do with I paid, they didn't, why they have a seat, and so on and so forth. We base our decision on students getting on the bus on free and reduced, especially based upon their prior year's free and reduced lunch application process. Because it takes the entire month of September for that, and into October for those processes to take place between us and parents getting the stuff in, it being filed, and actually getting the determination back as it pertains to they continue to get free and reduced lunch. A couple of curveballs that happened this year was one had to do with folks that were on health, thank you, Mass Health, and how Mass Health was considered, if you will, a financial benefit. It actually kicked out 30+ of our families out of receiving free and reduced lunch. It was 38 if I remember correctly. Let's just say between 30 and 40 since I don't have the number in front of me. And what happened was we then had to work with those families to say, I'm sorry, you now owe me $350 to take the bus. And then we also kind of really tidied up the issue of K-6. This is a 7 to 8 building. So who's all of a sudden in 7th or 8th grade, and we're catching up with them and saying, hey, yeah, you do, yes, you're taking the same bus, you're at the same house, it's the same mileage, it's the same route, but now your 6th grader is 0, but your 7th grader is $350. So we definitely have caught up with those situations, informing families. And we also had families who backed out, who said, you know, I'm not doing this. So the biggest issue that we have is typically here at the middle school, but we actually saw an increase in ridership in general of almost 100 students. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. That doesn't speak to folks who are running the other way. The concern is that the only other option that we currently have on transportation, there are 2 options if we don't start to look at some creative stuff. And again, we wouldn't come forward with internalizing transportation by just dropping the cost on the town side, but really is in the line item that talks about appropriations and the $37,000 increase, that's the $37,000 increase in the operations budget. And so every single year, you're seeing those increases. So the only option is, do you take the $350 and make it higher, which it's the highest around as it is, or do you eliminate busing in certain areas, which on 123 would be pretty significant. You would be talking about every student in 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th and 12th grade not being provided busing. That's if we think we have a crosswalk problem now or anything else, I think we can all rest assured. So we have to, you know, My job is to provide you as many facts as I can. We have to find a way around this transportation issue with the growing transportation budget just because of cost. We're going to go out to bid this year, and we're going to see that increase. And we're doing our darndest right now to just make it more competitive by talking to other companies before the bid process takes place, because it's legal for me to do that. But I just don't see it happening. We've had the same bidder. Last time we had 4 folks come in and pick up the bids, only 1 company bid. There's a question in the back, yes?
Can I ask a question? Is there a reason why there's the 2-mile limit? Like, is it possible to change from 2 miles, maybe to 4 miles,
I'll
get
do-
more people involved and drop the price of the...
State statute.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
the state statute is very clear in K-6. And then it kind of allows for the local board to determine. But it's state statute. Goes way back, late 60s, early 70s. The whole idea of getting children to school. You know, most of us in this room that are 40 or above probably do not pay a fee to get on a bus. We probably provided busing as much as we wanted to. I have spoken to a number of districts where busing has also been a positive on the town side. And that is, if the buses aren't being used by the schools, they can be used by groups such as senior centers for field trips, local pickup and drop off. So now you have, quote, your own service provider for a growing elderly population. So if you want to bring people to a senior center, you can have, besides your public transportation to Gaspard, you can actually have your own pickup and transportation. You can have your own bus and transportation for doctor's visits in the area or those type of things. I know a number of towns in the area do that now. So we plan to come to the committee with some ideas and thoughts and the bid, and we'll incorporate the town manager and the board of selectmen in that as well.
Yeah, I think the big gorilla in the closet here is the fact that we don't have sidewalks. You can't expect people to walk down even 123 for what they are. It's not that great a condition. Some areas are very narrow. They're not ADA compliant. There've been a lot of issues out there that have happened. So I know one of the things we're looking at is coming up with a program on right now we've been looking into where we can put sidewalks around the schools themselves. We've been working on that for a while, and hopefully Serpent will be able to increase some of these sidewalks in the town.
And on your agenda, you have the Safe Routes to School. We did file a $432,000 request with that, $400,000 coming from the Safe to Schools, quote, grant process, $32,000 coming from Chapter 90, so that would come from 90, that comes through yours, and that is for the LGN going from Pine to Plain to the corner of Washington, and that would have sidewalks and also bike paths. So we filed that, the deadline was the 11th, I filed it, I wrote it. I got some information from the town planner, and then I just wrote it. You know, our percentages of walkers still doesn't necessarily meet those cut scores, but we're also trying to make ourselves, you know, more of a green community, more, you know, bicycle friendly and all that stuff. So it is number 3 on the list, so let's hope that we have a chance at it.
We've tried over the last year too to talk more about transportation and what it costs us, because so many people, the perception is you pay $350 for your bus fee per kid. There's no family cap. People think that covers our bus bill. As you can see, it's not even close. Our bus bill is $1,065,000, or will be $1,065,000 when you bring in $190,180. It's not even close. So last year with, you know, the budget, the way that it was, we combined 4th through 8th grade busing. The next alternative is, do we have busing at all for the kids that aren't mandated by the state? I mean, that's something that we as a committee have had to talk about, and it's a reality for us. So I just think it's important to keep having this conversation to try to figure something out. I mean, it is crazy that our families have to pay $350 per kid with no family cap to ride a bus to school. It's absolutely crazy to me. So I just think it's worth mentioning that again, that the bus fees are in no way close to paying our bus bill. Any other questions on that?
Just a comment on that. I mean, looking down the road, we're trying to see what's best for the school, whether lease your own buses or go out and bid. If you figure it out, if your bus is $100,000, round numbers, how many buses do you have? 15.
15.
We have 15
How
currently.
many buses? $1.5 million. they're gonna last more than 20 years, maybe well, 15 years, maybe. The cost savings down the road is gonna be a lot less than we're paying now, if you break it out. So it is something that we should be looking forward to, all of us, to see if that's the way to go. Southeastern Regional does it, there are other districts that do it, so there's gotta be a reason why they do it.
Yeah, it's predominantly exactly what you just said, is they're looking and they're saying to themselves, if the biggest idea currently is leasing, right? You're leasing a bus in the vicinity of a 3 or 5 year, it's gonna cost you $12,000 to $15,000 a year, a little less, a little more, depending on how big. Of course, the least amount of buses you have, the worse the price is, but it's lease. Now you don't have, you can garage it during the day, but you got a problem with one, or they need tire rotation. I mean, there are leases out there that it doesn't include the tires, it doesn't include the oil change. There's some that are just, everything. If you don't have a mechanic, you don't have to worry about it. You take the bus in, you pick up the other bus, you have a safety bus for the day. Typically, you don't have one bus going down every day, you just rotate them through. But Mr. Solly, you're absolutely correct. It's all about, do you put a financial plan today that has a little bit of an issue today, but is going to save you hundreds of thousands, if not millions? There is a cost, and the private businesses predominantly work off of a 30-hour week to provide healthcare costs, and the public sector will cut into the law that requires 20 hours. So how many of these could we actually run for only 20 hours or less than 20 hours to not provide healthcare? That would be very difficult for us to do. Most of them are going to be in that 22 to 25-hour range. Automatically, that provides healthcare, and in this area, $25 to $27 an hour. So there's how and then long-term planning for the town, they become county employees, which means you do have a county hit on the retirement system, which you don't have with teachers per se or administrators, but you do have with our county employees as well. So that's the negative.
The town manager wanted to just let the school committee, remind the school committee that according to the charter, the Northern Public Schools are due to have their budget to the town manager's office within 8 weeks prior to the date the Board of Selectmen convened the spring town meeting. So based on that, the fiscal year 20 budget, the Northern Public Schools should be in the town manager's office by March 18th, 2019.
We would request that you move the town meeting to the 14th, so we can pick up another day.
You can get a couple for it.
Is that it for that one, Bob?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. The next topic for us, the committee thought it was important to bring up social emotional learning in trauma-sensitive schools. We had Mr. Vinnie Searcy present to us a month or so ago on this topic, and even for us sitting here, hearing some of the things that Vinnie had to bring up was eye-opening, and we thought it would be worthwhile for you guys to hear some of the same, so that you know what we're experiencing in our schools. Thanks for coming.
As everybody knows Vinnie, because he's a local guy, and he's now working with us as of this year, which we're really happy to. He's been a great addition because of his background working in an urban district. So we have been talking about this idea, this whole thing of trauma-sensitive schools and what that means, and it can be very complicated if you're not someone that's sitting on a day-to-day like we do. But we just wanted to share. I wanted to have him just share a couple of blurbs. We're not going to read this entire page to you, like I said earlier. You folks are professionals; you can read it, and maybe we can take it up again. But we just wanted to continue that, although we have a fantastic school system, of which many of you have utilized, we have a growing, as we do statewide, of issues within our student populations, regardless of socioeconomics, race, diversity, gender, you name it, socioeconomics being one of our more diverse. So I wanted to just have him give you some highlights, if you will, or some statistics of some of the issues that we're dealing with and how we're trying to deal with them.
So thank you for having me and listening about this very important topic, because I think one of the things that Dr. Mayetta said is this is not, I came from an urban district, but this is not an urban problem. You look at mental health, mental illness, and statistically, you look at trauma, you look at substance abuse. It cuts across socioeconomic status, race, culture. It is an epidemic and a growing epidemic. Especially around the increase in opiate use. So So the first page here that I presented sort of touches upon some of the major issues that we're seeing, depression and suicide. In particular, I think I want to point out that suicide is the third leading cause of death in teens. And again, that is not, just an urban issue. In fact, it is a growing concern in suburbia. And many of the folks that I work with from our districts similar to ours, the other social emotional directors and so forth, are running into the same issues. 1 in 5 teenagers will suffer with depression before age 19. And oftentimes kids are not treated, even with private insurance. We think, okay, they have good private insurance, they have Blue Cross, they have Universal. The limits on mental health coverage is pretty severe. So we actually, even here in Norton, with my staff, we have a harder time finding good treatment for students who have private insurance. Especially if we're looking for things to do with family work, crisis intervention, mentors. It's just not offered. So some of our students that get the least amount of services are the students who do have private insurance, and which means we're picking up a lot of that work here in schools. The other, I think, important piece to understand is that, anxiety is a growing problem within not only our district, but across the districts in this area. Again, sitting with sort of my colleagues from other districts, we're talking about the amount of anxiety that the students are feeling. Some of this is around social media, some of it's around bullying, especially cyberbullying. The pressure that some of these students are feeling to form, to engage in college and career activities and so forth. We're seeing that. I would say my time here in Norton, especially at the high school level, it's the #1 issue that we're dealing with. When we talk about some of our programming that we're doing, especially our regular ed programming, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, many of the issues we're dealing with is kids that are crippling anxiety, trouble getting to school, trouble getting work done, and these are bright, engaged students that are just being overwhelmed by all of the pressures that they're feeling and dealing with. And then the other big issue that I highlighted here was trauma. This is something that sort of in the field is becoming new and more pronounced in terms of the research. This isn't theoretical. This is what I like about this. This is based on hard scientific data, brain research, scans, so forth and so on. The data really was driven from, again, not what you would consider when most people think of trauma. You're thinking about urban districts or kids that are seeing gangs and that level. That's one form of trauma. But in reality, we're talking about prolonged stress, domestic violence, substance abuse within a family, and that again cuts across all socioeconomic levels. So in the research is showing that students or children who have that level of experiences, that level of stress and trauma, over time, especially in their formative developmental years, the brain actually changes. Certain parts of the brain are either overactive or underactive, and that impacts behavior, obviously, social interactions, and academics. And when we talk about that, and I won't, again, read you all of the statistics, but, 2% of all children are sexually assaulted. It's just, think about our population, carry that up numbers wise, think about your classrooms. 25% of U.S. children will experience some kind of traumatic event or prolonged trauma, exposure to trauma, before the age of 4. Now again, going back to the opioid epidemic, this is predicted to get markedly worse. Here in Norton, just to give you a taste, we have 5 identified students in preschool who were born addicted to opioids. So, and that's who we know of. The other piece of social emotional learning that is important is we're getting pushed back like we always do from colleges and the workforce about what skills they feel that students are not graduating with. So this is part of the social emotional. It's not just about mental health. It's not just about those kids that are suffering, but also about the skills that they need, all of our students need, to be successful both in college and career. And so some of the things that they're asking the colleges and the universities and then by nature the workforce are asking us to look at is they're finding that students are having trouble with regulating their emotions, the ability to work in a team structure, the ability to plan and organize, and communicate inside and outside in a meaningful way with members of their own team and also others. And then the ability to manage stress and be flexible. So when we talk about social emotional learning, it's just not about students that are having issues with mental health, but about kids in general and how they're going to adapt and the skills they're going to need to be successful adults. So here in the district, just some statistics from last year that I was able to gather. We had, when students are in a significant crisis, that the school adjustment counselor or guidance counselor has met with them, and they're looking, there's concerns about them doing harm to themselves or others. We had 26 incidents where we had to ask members of either the hospital team or a doctor's office or the mobile crisis team from Department of Mental Health to come in and do an official screening for hospitalization. In the elementary level, we had 26. At the middle school level, we had 37 of those incidents, and the high school, 24. 8 of those resulted in an ambulance call, so the student was significantly at risk, that they couldn't even be done. We could not ask the parents to take them to the hospital or take them to the mobile crisis, or even wait for mobile to come to us. They had to go out by ambulance. And there was one additional call from an after-school program. Currently, on the nice part, putting some things in place, we're projecting at this point about a 50% decrease in that for this year. But mental health is not always predictable. So I could come back in June and say, well, guess what? We didn't meet those numbers, or we exceeded those numbers. But that's a credit to some of our staff and some of our programming that we put in already. The other piece is that the high school has a bridge program, which is a transition program, regular education for students who have either had a placement for psychiatric reasons in a hospital or had some kind of prolonged medical condition. It's really transitioning students back into the high school program so that they can be successful. And just looking at last year, we had 36 total students that were part of that program at Norton High School. And it was its first year, so it was really growing, and people were trying to figure out how to use it. 17 of those students were returning from a psychiatric hospitalization. 7 of those were prolonged medical hospitalizations or serious concussions. And then 12 were really students that were suffering from such high levels of anxiety or other mental health conditions that we were really trying to use it to prevent them from having to go for more services. It's a pretty cost-effective and, more importantly, a way to keep kids engaged in school, prevent dropout, and so forth. This year so far, we have 16 students have been serviced so far this year. 10 are fully participating in the program at the moment. 6 students are currently checking in, so working with the staff in the program, the teacher and the adjustment counselor, to be maintained and help them maintain their status in the regular ed setting. And we have 2 students that are awaiting placement after hospitalization, so we're sort of working with their transition back from their hospitalization. 8 of those students came from a psychiatric facility. 4 students were using this as a preventative measure to help them stay out of such a situation, and then 4 who have suffered concussions or medical hospitalization, things like mono or something to that effect. So why are we doing this? Well, there's a financial piece to social emotional learning. These are students that are at significant risk for out of district placement. And if you look at some of the school systems locally that don't provide some of these services, you'll see that their out of district budgets can be pretty high. One student who has this level of social emotional need, and we don't service here through our programs, could cost up to $150,000 a year. So you look at those numbers and the number of kids we're talking about, and that's elementary. You have an elementary student, that could go on for year after year. So if you build programs internally, there's still significant costs there. So if we can catch them earlier, do more preventative stuff, train our regular ed staff and some of our special ed staff in these techniques to improve their skills, then we're less likely to need more services. Also, if you don't do this, you're going to have a greater chance of dropouts and other issues that occur, which also impedes our ability to get grants and other financial benefits. More importantly, in my mind, there's cost to individual students. There's a much higher chance of successful suicide attempts. Some of the students we were talking about are at significant risk for that kind of action or that kind of unfortunate outcome. There's a marked increase for the likelihood of dropping out for these students, and all of that could go with that. Decreased chance of college acceptance or employability, and definitely an increased chance of being involved in a criminal justice system. Often these kids engage in externally acting out behaviors, which we call substance abuse, which then leads to, police involvement and so forth. So what are we doing? Again, sort of very quickly. Number one is a portrait of a graduate initiative that Dr. Baeta has started before I came aboard, and to us, that's sort of the collective vision of sort of where we want to go as a school department and what we want to see our students achieve. And that's really the overarching goals, so that when we start to talk about social emotional learning, teaching social skills, anger management, all of that, it fits. These are the skills that kids need to be healthy and productive, not only when they're in school, but when they leave us. And it allows us to link all our initiatives so that our parents, our students, and our staff understand where we're going. Our biggest initiative that we're doing right now in terms of my department, social emotional learning, is the Safe and Supportive Schools through a trauma-sensitive approach. This is a scientifically backed initiative, as I talked to you as I mentioned a little bit before. It's understanding how kids who have experienced complex trauma, prolonged stress, how their brains actually develop. What areas are they're going to be impacted? How's that going to look in the classroom? How's that going to look in the schoolyard? And then how is our staff going to be able to recognize that? Not just assume, okay, Johnny's unmotivated, or Johnny's doing this to make me angry, but to actually understand how the brain structure changes, and then what the initiatives are. The nice thing about the research also indicates that simple initiatives, simple interventions, most importantly, relationships with caring adults, literally changes that brain structure back towards the positive. So these kids, it's not a death sentence. These things can change, kids can make progress. We just have to learn how to identify that. And that's what we're working on. As I said, it's based on research that is ongoing and pretty complex. It's not theory anymore, like when we all study psychology, it's very much based in medicine. I think it's important to point out again that this trauma research was originally based on middle to upper class families. It was originally started by insurance companies in California, similar to our Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we're not talking about kids on Mass Health. We're not talking about the kids I used to work with. We're really talking about very similar populations to what we have here in North. Upwards of 50% of our students, based on this research, have experienced one of these things they call adverse childhood experiences. And these are the things that over time can change that brain structure. So think about this, 50% of students in upper middle class backgrounds or middle class backgrounds have suffered at least one incidence of, one experience of physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse or neglect, or ongoing household exposure to things like substance abuse, parental mental illness, domestic violence, and criminal behavior. That's what this research is based on. It doesn't take into account things like homelessness. It doesn't take into account things ongoing, prolonged cyberbullying, and those kinds of things that do have the similar kinds of impacts. So what are we doing, especially around the trauma-sensitive approach? This year already, in August, we did an initial training for all of the administrators in the school department. And then we followed that up with a training, an overview for trauma-sensitive approaches and initiatives for all of our staff. Pre-K to 12, all of the teachers were trained in support staff. Ongoing discussions at all the buildings levels. So now when we have a student support team, it's just not like, we also take into account, well, what else could be going on? It may be trauma. It isn't really about talking about does this kid have trauma or not have trauma. It's how can we approach them differently? How do we think about them and what could be going on so we become more investigative in our approaches. And then we were lucky enough to partner with Leslie University, who really specializes in this work, and they are going to do a graduate course. They've worked with us and their philanthropic partners to offer us a pretty significantly reduced rate. So we're going to be able to train 45 of our Norton Public School teachers, and administrators, starting next week. We'll have 3 different sections, and they'll receive graduate credit and really begin the work that we need to do here to address these issues. We also follow up this with ongoing work with positive behavioral systems. which is being run at our elementary schools and soon to be run, hopefully, at our middle school and high school. And that's really about, it's an evidence-based program about behavioral interventions and prevention. It supports academic, social, and emotional competencies. We are also been asked to be part of the Excellence Through Emotional Learning Network. This is a DESE-driven program with some of the experts in the area, including the Rennie Center. We're one of 20 districts in Massachusetts that have been part of this and really lead the road on social emotional learning and working with kids who need this kind of support. We are working with those other districts to develop a systematic approach to social emotional learning interventions and policies and procedures. In addition, we have the Social Emotional Committee, which is guiding work across the district, providing guidance around interventions and assessment. We have school and culture and climate committees, trainings for staff on sort of tools for their toolbox, things like mindfulness, zones of regulation, responsive classroom, social thinking, just other ways of reaching kids and interacting with them in a positive manner. We're doing ongoing screenings at the middle school and high school using SBRIT and SOS, which are both for suicidal ideation, thoughts of suicide, where are kids at, how do they feel, what's their depression level, and substance abuse. We do assemblies for students on substance abuse, mental health, and other related topics. We're doing ongoing classroom management training, using data analysis and coaching. We're even, it's a broad topic, especially here in Norton. One of the things we're doing is we're trying to improve our support of high school students through the college and career path and how they get there and what they need to do, because that is a huge driving force of anxiety for our students and our families. So we feel like if we do a better job with that, that reduces their overall stress, anxiety that they're feeling. And then finally, we're trying to develop relationships with our community providers here. We have the mobile crisis team right here in Norton. We almost share a parking lot with them. We are working hard to make them partners across the board. And the Department of Mental Health now is saying not only can they're in the spring, hopefully, not only will they be able to service students that have Mass Health, but they'll also begin to service students who have private insurance. And we're also, again, building relationships with the Department of Mental Health, DCF, and so forth. Really try to do a wraparound and work together for these students. So, any questions, anything you can answer?
I think one thing that maybe Vinnie can talk to too is that even though they've had the things for the students, the seminars and all that kind of thing, and even though the students themselves may not see themselves as being in crisis, their friend may. Mm-hmm. And their friend says, hey, by the way, can you talk to so-and-so? After that seminar, I'm seeing some things in that person, and that's happened more than once from what I know of.
Right.
So just by having the seminar itself, even though you might not catch that specific child who's in crisis, they have peers that see it in them and are willing to help too.
I think we're also seeing that with our teachers. I can think of in this month alone 2 teachers who I don't know, who said to me, I don't know if I would have known to ask these questions or flag this student to you if I hadn't had even some of this initial training. It just raised a red flag enough for me to say, geez, maybe I should talk to guidance.
If I may?
Yeah.
Vinnie, I think it's great, everything that you talked about. I'd like to ask too, I'm involved with a program called Sandy Hook Promise. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's about preventing gun violence. And as you were talking, so one of the things they focus on, there are 2 primary programs for middle and high school students are Start With Hello and Say Something. Say Something's really about identifying depression, bullying, things like that. Have you guys considered that? And I say that personally because I am a Promise leader and I'm a Promise presenter, and I'd love to bring this to the Norton community. They've also just partnered with Disney as well. Disney's going to back them to build a program for K through 6, which I think is fantastic, because I think the earlier that you start in these programs for inclusion and identifying risk, I think it really helps. The other thing too is part of that program is the SAVE Club. It's Students Against Violence Everywhere. The club was formed about 30 years ago by kids who, I think 5 or 6 kids, one of their friends had committed suicide. So they formed this club as a support group. Literally the Sandy Hook program, the purpose of it is for students to run the program, to participate in the SAVE Club, to do things on behalf of other students, as well as for high school students to take it to the grade school and really empower the kids on understanding the warning signs and how do they help friends and finding trusted adults? Is that something that you guys have considered, or?
So we've
or
done
you guys
some of,
talked to?
some of that, like the hello, and we've
Yeah.
done, I didn't cover it all in here, but that is part of
Yeah,
it.
it's
I would
been- it's
love to
been in
speak to
2
you more
schools.
about it,
Yeah.
because we've done parts of it. But, you know, I think it's growing, as you said,
Yeah.
and they're expanding their intervention, so I'd love to talk to you more about it, because we
Okay.
might have even more information than I do about those particular interventions. I am working, I mean, again, we're also working with the American Society for the Prevention of Suicide, working with them currently to look at some grants, grant-funded programming,
Right.
to bring some of that into our schools.
No, I think it's great, and Sandy Hook Promise is a no-cost program.
Right,
It's
right,
fully
yeah.
donor-supported, so I think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, no, we do some of that work, but I think it's, again, there's a lot of, that we need to grow, and that is definitely something I'd love to speak to you more about.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we as a school committee, as well as Dr. Bayetta and the school district, thought it was important for Vinnie to come tonight and talk to you guys as well, because this isn't just a school issue, this is a community issue. And I think that, you know, we are working together on so many things now that we really, you know, when it comes time for budget season, and some of us get more heated than others, maybe me, this is why. There are kids in our little town of Norton who are suffering and are affected. And that, to me, is, you could just tell me as my own child. That means more to me, so that's why maybe we come, you know, strong for things, because for any child to hurt like this is not okay with me, and I'm sure it's not okay with anybody in this room. But this is why. This is a community issue. This is our next generation of running our town that we all love. So that's why we just thought it was important for Vinnie to come tonight to kind of give you an overview of what we are actually seeing in our schools in Norton. You know, we all think we live in this great, safe community, which it is, but we still have things that need to be addressed and worked on.
I think it's also important, and thanks to your support, because you supported it, these 45 people getting trained, that's the extra money that we got in the fall town meeting, where we asked for $24,000 on top of our materials and supply line item. So this is a perfect example of how the money we said we went after is directly being utilized. So the FinCom support, your support, and then the town meeting, I know it's just a budget for us, but what we're trying to show is that when we get these special funds, that what we said we were going to do, we're actually doing. So we know we have 45 folks who are going to become more aware of what it is to be a trauma-sensitive, if you will, professional in a classroom where anything can happen. We are not your typical school district where some of us have worked. We were neighbors at one point in a small district or more of a rural district for me, in an urban district, with great kids and great families, but with just so much socioeconomic differences and demographic differences. This is not a socio-demographic issue. This is an issue that hits home with everybody. And it hits home with rich families, middle-class families, well-off families, poor, you name it, black, white, blue, green, special education students, non-special education students, ELL students, it doesn't matter. It hits every single group of kids. And to be mindful, just a few years back, about 2007-8, your dropout rate in this district was one of the highest in the area. 19 students a year, 6.26% of your students. We're almost at zero, right? Our numbers and we're not going to be successful from our view as a team until it is zero. And every year there's one or two. It is what it is. But it doesn't mean that we're not trying to creative ways. Every student that leaves us in a dropout is an issue for the community and an issue for the school system. And then the bigger part is what happens to students who are in the data that Vinnie presented that are hospitalized. What would we do with those kids? What would happen to them? They get behind. They come to school. They get further behind. The socialization issues. That's why it costs money. That bridge program at the high school is about $130,000 to $150,000 a year in salary. But look at the number of kids that we could potentially lose if we didn't have the program. About 3 to 4 times the amount of what we pay for 2 people in actual cost to the district and to the community. So, there's no program that's probably more of a bang for your buck than our bridge program. I will tell you that if you looked at the numbers, what you see is a growing number at the middle school level. So when are we gonna, really pinch this and say, our bridge program needs to be part of our middle school program as well? We need to sustain that for students and potentially get students to not have to utilize the program at the high school because they're learning all of these things and getting the supports at the middle grades. And we know that preventative works. It's just a matter of how we are able to do it. So thank you for that. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for the information. I
Can
mean,
I ask you a question for you?
you sit and you think about, I mean, when I went to school, and that was a long time ago, the problem is that, you guys today have to deal with a lot more than my teachers had to deal with, way back. I had a mother who was home every day, that kind of stuff. And I didn't, as much as, I came from a broken home, so, I had my own issues too. But at the same time, reading some of the board points that you're making, some of the issues that you're addressing, the whole foundation of the school system has totally changed. And it's amazing to read and see, I mean, we had the same issues too. I mean, they were there. But, one of my buddies might come up and whack me on the side of the head and tell me to knock it off, and that was the end of it. It's not like that today. We're in a society today that is totally different than it was when I was a kid. I felt safer, I think, as a kid than kids feel today in general. And I think it's sad that we have to take the time and the effort to spend on all these different situations that you, especially the bullying, the social media stuff is mind-staggering. I mean, if I were a teacher today, or I'd go out of my mind. I don't know how you do it. How do you keep their attention to begin with?
I have a substitute meet tomorrow morning. Can help you learn that real quick.
No, I'd probably be the one hauled out of here.
These children number that.
I think he gets suspended.
I'd be in the corner for sure.
I do think one of the things too that we have to look at is the mental health system has
Yeah.
very much changed, and some of that has been for the positive, and then some of it maybe not so much. And so when I started 25 years ago, I started in private mental health services and psychiatric hospitals. I oftentimes equivalent some of the programs that we're running day treatment while trying to provide an education. And because there is no long-term day treatment, there is none of this. That's where I came from. I'm doing the same work 25 years later, but I'm doing it in a way that is also trying to provide an education in the high school, maintain credits and graduation requirements. So, with, less staff than I would have had back in the day in the hospital setting.
You
So
guys do a great job.
it's a very different, and it's the teachers, and I think the other point about community is social emotional learning isn't just about these kids that are high risk. It's about talking about being part of your community. It's talking about those other skills. So, having those discussions with kids and with parents. I'll use the example, I think that the soccer team going to the senior center, that was part of that's about our discussion about being involved in not just with the kids, but with the booster clubs and so forth. It carries over. It's really promoting, being part of a community again, and those kinds of skills and those kinds of needs. So it goes beyond this. Obviously, this is the targeted group, but when you do it well, and teachers see that, and parents and kids see it, it really does work for every part of the community.
Yeah, a question for you. The incidents requiring screening, I'm assuming that the 87 and 88 are in-school
Mhm.
incidents. So
Mhm.
do we track, or do we have a way to track incidents that happen outside of school? In the end, the kid spends,
I do have
After.
like students that are been hospitalized. We have that, oftentimes students that are hospitalized are not
so
necessarily
that we know about because
hospitalized.
they don't come in the next day. But
Right,
I mean,
right.
this sounds like more like something happens, and so there's a screening, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily, so how do you, so kind of expanding on Sherry's, it's a community issue, it really is. So it's highly probable that there are a lot of incidents that happen outside of our schools that we don't know about, yet that student comes back to school the next day and is affected by it. How do we
So there's a
account for
couple of
that?
ways. Luckily, we have a police department that works really closely with us, and a fire department, so, some of that information comes that way. Reality, they're very much in tune with, hey, this may have happened, or the ambulance call is there, let's reach out to this family. Building that relationship with the mobile crisis team is gonna be big, especially if DMH does what they're saying they're gonna do, and moves the ability to have those done with private insurance, because then we'll have a much better way to track that. Down the road, I'd like to, build some relationships with folks at the emergency rooms and so forth and so on.
Right.
That's how you sort of do it, I think, in tracking as best as you can. Some of this is private, and you're just not gonna know.
Yeah.
That's the approach for trauma sensitive, we don't know. I only know of maybe, if there's 30 kids in a classroom, I might know 1 or 2's trauma history, but there's probably 6 or 7 in that classroom that have some level of trauma or crisis or family, conflict that we're not aware of. So we have to treat it, that's why you treat all of the kids in a certain way, and this is why the interventions that we're putting into place to help them learn those skills. None of these are best practices. It's not gonna hurt another kid who's not having those issues. It's only gonna teach him or her a different skill set. They still need to learn how to manage their emotions. They still need to know how to be flexible and attend. So it's not gonna hurt them, but it's definitely gonna help the ones not only that we've identified, but the ones that are there that we're not sure of. So that's why we take that approach, because we can't possibly track it all.
No, you can't. I was just curious.
We're doing our best to try to do that, and again, I want to say, these are incidents that required screenings for hospitalization. This is not incidents of when my counseling staff saw a child because they were upset, or because they had a moment, so to speak. These are just the ones that they felt needed to go that next step. The numbers for that are
It's
much,
staggering.
much higher.
These numbers are staggering by themselves.
Right.
That's one every 2 days. That's 180 days. You get
Well, I'll
almost
tell you-
90. That's one every 2 days.
Since I wrote this, there were 2 more incidents,
It's crazy.
and I wrote this today.
Well, I think during the
Tuesday, I wrote this.
During the
So-
conference that I had gone to too, one of the things that they said, and back to the community issue, one of the questions that they said to ask kids is not only how do you feel about your community, but how do you think your community feels about you? Because if they get that community connection and they are proud to live here and they do see that there's opportunities and all that kind of thing, it might be that one connection that they need. And getting it through school, but also getting it after school when you're walking through the town, or when you're going into Dunkin' Donuts, or when you're going and having those connections with what you feel is safe in your community makes a big difference as well, because it continues after the school day.
And I don't want to be just negative, because I think there's a lot of really positive things here. I mean, I've said it to Dr. Baeta, I've sent him pictures from, sporting events where I'm like, you have 120 kids here for this soccer game. Like, there is really lots here in Norton that we can build on, but there are still those marginalized students that we have to make sure that we engage, because there is a lot for them to build on. There is a nice sense of community. I've been here for 25 years as a resident. I get that. But, again, how do we connect those kids up to this greater sense?
That's right, Vinny. I'm a vocal part of the Norton School Committee. I go to all the sporting events. I cheer on my Lancers, and I interact with the kids wherever I go in the town.
Yes, you do, Peter.
I'm a vital part of this community.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So next on my agenda is the update on the town hall and the council on aging feasibility study. They're in the process of still, we've hired 2 companies to look at both buildings and try to determine what the actual need. We've sent out a lot of surveys, we've asked a lot of questions, and trying to determine what we really need, what criteria we need to make these buildings work. We're very, very much in the beginning stages of it. It's going to be, they have put together some designs that we're looking at right now. They're all very preliminary. And the hope is to have something prepared by May town meeting. The other part of the problem is determining a location where we can put these buildings, because we really don't have any space to put them. And years ago when we built this building, we were first looking at this land for the possibility of sports recreational facilities. And along the way came the fact that oops, we needed another school. So we combined our resources, the school committee, the board of selectmen back then, combined our resources to make it happen. What's happening now is, I think most of us can agree, maybe, we're not sure what the timing, but most of us can agree that town hall is a mess. And continues to get worse every year, as much as we try to hold it together. COA The senior citizens are getting, the population is growing tremendously. The old two-room schoolhouse, which was converted into a fire station, which was converted into a COA building, doesn't work anymore. So we've obviously been looking at other options. The land issue, we've got a piece of land down on the other side of 495 that we're looking at. We're working with Mass Highway right now to see what it would take to acquire that. Not suggesting it's the right spot, but we're looking at it. The land behind the town hall is another location we're looking at for a town hall. COA, we're not sure. We're looking at the Clemmy property between the town hall and the police station. But that would be a stretch because the landowner is kind of difficult to work with and is expecting a lot more money than we're willing to pay. So the one golden opportunity we have right now is down on Elm Street, the Reed and Barton facility. They went bankrupt 2 years ago, and it was it's not a Superfund site, but there were contamination, they part of the old jewelry business. And we were fortunate enough to, first of all, they came to us and said, we're bankrupt, we're not doing anything, you guys can have it. And we said, we're not gonna touch it. Because as we learned from SPAC landfill, you don't want to get involved and contaminate the site, so we basically said that's not going to work. We did reach out to the DEP, EPA, and they actually stepped in. And they're in the process of cleaning that facility up. If you've gone by, you'll notice there's a lot of work going on behind it. They're doing a lot of dredging, they're doing a lot of cleaning, and the asbestos is being removed from inside the building by yet another company, and the cost of the town so far is zero. We're not paying, we haven't spent a cent. When they're done, they want us to take it over. They want us to take over the property. For nothing, we just take it over. And most people don't realize it, but it's a pretty good sized piece of property, because it not only goes, when you see the factory, which is 170,000 square feet, it goes down along the river behind it, and it also has land on the other side of the waterway, which has a dam. So it's a pretty good sized parcel, and the land across the street, with a big parking lot is also part of it. So uniquely, it's probably a great location if we decide to put two buildings up. And then again, there's one option where we could put them both at the same location, along with walking trails and basically anything else we can come up with. It's a beautiful view behind it, Eagle Pond and the dam, really a pretty spot. So once that's turned over to the town, we have some options on it. First and foremost, we have to take it down. We've actually had a company, maybe two, that approached us already and said, we'll take it down, we want the material that's inside it. They want the beams, they want the old structure that's there, they want to take it down and repurpose it or reuse it for whatever reason. So we're pretty excited about that possibility happening. Not to say the town will have to spend some money, but by the time they're done, it's going to be clean, and we don't have to worry about any contamination. The plans that they're putting together right now kind of show both buildings together, with what we call a common use room in the middle, which could be utilized for town elections, town meetings if necessary, that kind of stuff. So we've got some very different designs going on between the COA and the town hall. But just kind of giving an update on it, where we're at it with it. I will tell you that once we take possession of the Elm Street property, we cannot sell it. It's going to be ours forever. That's part of the criteria for taking it. They will give it to us, but we can't turn around and do something else with it. The only real use we have for it is town use. So just something to keep in mind. But the manager had that on his notes, I just wanted to bring you up to date on what's going on with that.
What's the timeline on the cleanup? Do they know?
I have no idea.
No.
I mean, we haven't started looking at what the costs are and all that. As far as the land itself, they'll probably be out by the end of next year.
The EPA would be out. Okay, so that's not that bad.
If not soon.
All right.
They're really into it right now. Really
So
do.
once they're done, you can start the next
Yeah.
process of demoing.
And we'll be responsible for it, so we're gonna have to take it down. It doesn't look like it from the road, but there are floors and roofs that are caving in on the property already. It hasn't been used in a period of time, so it's starting to come down all by itself. That's all I have on that.
I think, do you have anything else, Joe?
I just have one that's not on yours, and that I provided you a line item school choice receiving and expenditure. So since FY 16, we've taken in, or 15, we've taken in $1,377,170 in school choice. We've expended $1,249,853.98, and then I gave you every single line item since FY 16, the last 3 years, including this year's. So all those small items, the $20,000 item, the $500 item, that currently at 109 students in school choice in the district. The 290s that you see there is year-to-date. As you know, they now, or you may not know, but they now provide the school choice fund on a monthly basis, not a two-payment system basis. So we'll continue to see a payment coming in. We do not accept school choice students after September 1st, so pretty much we're fixed. The school committee will take on. You'll see a lot of it is around professional development and the actual purchases of items, including all of the technology that we purchase in our one-to-one. We're currently one-to-one in 4th through 11th grade. We'll be adding 12th grade as the 11th graders move up. And we have 4th and 5th grade one-to-one. They don't get to take them home, they're in the classroom, but they all have the Chromebooks as well. So feel free to go through that and scrutinize it and review it and all of that stuff, and feel free to utilize my office for any communication. But this is $1,300,000 of funds that the town didn't have, that these students that are choosing to come to us because they like Norton Public Schools, they think it's a good place to be. We continue to get calls every day, and I have to turn folks away just because of the timelines. The committee will look at it probably next month, and then we typically, depending on what happens with the budget process and everything else, have seats open in, if not all grades, at least in certain grades. The big discussion, as you know, and I know you received a very thick, or very thorough, I should say, and a thick commentary from Mike Units last, would have been right over the late summer, early fall. FinCom was asking questions about the expenditure of school choice and how it happens, and Mike pretty much cut and pasted the law and how that goes through the school committee, and it's not part of the typical expenditure. But I wanted to show you that our students wouldn't have what they have if it wasn't for these funds. So when you're looking at just on that first page, at $399 in my math supplies, that was because we potentially were short on those supplies for the My Math curriculum. And so we would have had to just, I guess, copy stuff instead of just getting what the kids actually need. So feel free to question that as much as you like, but I wanted to provide it to you. We'll provide it again in the spring as part of our budget process as well.
Next on my agenda is Route 123 projects, as there are two that are going to be occurring that'll have an impact on your school system. Route 123 East Main Street, from Pine Street down to 495. Now, the project we've been working on now for 12 years. State works real fast. And in July, they will be awarding the bids, and there may be some construction going on East Main Street at 495 with the installation of new traffic lights. That's going to be hopefully in the fall of next year. More than likely, most of the work won't commence until 2020. They're suggesting it's going to take 5 years to make the improvements, because it entails not only just road construction, sidewalks, it will be all brand new sidewalks. It's going to involve replacing gas lines and water lines and sewer lines and everything else that goes along with it. So it's going to be a long project. They're asking us, the board recently, at the meeting last week, they asked us to really consider doing a lot of night work to be conducted between Pine Street and what we call the hump. There's about maybe 8 homes involved in that area. By doing night work, they feel they can knock 2 years off the project. So we have a choice. We can leave it as it is and write out for 5 years, or we can try to get it done in 3. That's a decision that's road commissioners are going to have to make, and we're just starting to get into conversation about it now. Bringing up 123 because it will have an impact on the bus routes.
Right.
There's no question it's going to have an impact on that. And on West Main Street, in front of your schools, we're in the process right now. We're just about ready to start on the Housing Authority all the way back to Wheaton College, installing water and new sewer lines through that area, which will involve tying in schools. We'll be tying in the high school and the old school at the same time, along with, I think, 100 111 other connections along the way. That's going to be beginning late summer or early fall of this year, 2019. So that'll be coming up just about the time you guys are going back to school. So.
Maybe on Thursday.
Right after the election.
So you
Let's
guys
start the
are-
same day.
You guys are gonna have a really great time with that, but that's, just to bring up the date on both of those. Those are pretty much east and west Main for a period of time when we torn up. Fortunately, with the sewer line, the construction guideline behind it, they're trying to keep it to one side, so it won't have a total impact on it. On East Main from Pine to 495, that's gonna be a total mess. It's gonna be road widenings and sidewalks, and it's gonna take a while to get that done. On the Blue Star Industrial Park, Winter Street, we call it Winter Street. They've named it, now it's called Blue Star. It's named after Route 25, is also called the Blue Star Highway. So they've named it under that, and they're anticipating having the construction of the first building in the fall of 2019. It's still in the process, they're still working for the planning board, trying to get everything done. It involves, I think, only 8 buildings. There's a number of construction going on over there. To our, making you folks aware of it, to our advantage is, imagine the new construction fees we're gonna develop from this building. One building is, I believe it's 180,000 square feet. You're gonna get a lot of fees from it, construction fees, and then on top of that, we'll get the additional tax revenues, the infrastructure. We're very excited about this project, which is gonna generate a lot of money for the town in the next few years. It's gonna be a fast-paced program, they're gonna get it going, and it's gonna keep moving. But it's gonna involve the entire section of town, along with a new set of traffic lights at the entrance ways there to the industrial park too. So that's, again, starting in 2019. Sewer line will be also included in that from Winter Street up East Main Street to the hump. So part of the East Main Street project is we're improving the road, but at the same time, we'll be laying a new sewer line, so the houses from the hump to 495 will have to have town sewers. So that will change, probably change the makeup of that area of town in the future. Being so close to the highway, once you get town sewerage, anything can happen. So that would be some other changes. But that's all going to be happening starting this year, 2019. And I think that's all I have for now. We are going to be obviously meeting a couple of weeks to talk about a couple of other programs. Mr. Byetta told a couple of us the other day about some of the new programs that to me are very exciting to see. So, but I think it's more important that we continue an open dialogue between both boards. And we love the idea of having these meetings because we find out things that we don't know about, and you guys hopefully are kept in mind and keeping you up to date on what's happening in town. And there's a lot of very good things happening, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. And I think in the future, if we can continue to combine our resources and our talents, because there are things that we need that can help us do a better job too. So I think we can get some great things done. I think it's just beginning.
Great. We talked about meeting every other month, and now we're meeting every other week. The next meeting coming up,
Well, that
so.
we may stretch that out. Very exciting news that the superintendent has, so I think it's well worth us having
Definitely.
a meeting next week.
Right. Yeah.
In 2 weeks. We'll have that at the Selectmen's meeting room, and we'll cram us all in there somehow and make it all happen.
So just for the record, we have another joint meeting, School Committee Board of Selectmen, on January 24th, starting at 7?
7 o'clock.
Okay, so 7 o'clock in the Board of Selectmen meeting room at Town Hall. Do
We
you
have a
guys have anything
presentation.
else on your,
I just wanted to provide you, I did give you a copy because I saw it on your agenda of the privatization of food services. I did give you the line item financials to
I
date.
saw that, yeah.
So that's 1, 2, that associate, they are now, have reorganized as a union within a private group. 13 of our original 17 employees are part
Oh, great.
and are continuing to work for us, sometimes in different roles. Some have moved up actually in roles. They are continuing to negotiate. They just recently had to negotiate a tentative agreement. It didn't pass, so they're back at the table to continue to work on that. So that's positive in general. If you haven't seen our food services, we've seen some really good things. I think our employees would tell you that the products that we have are much better. In terms of the options, I'd ask you to just call my office and I'll take you to lunch at the high school. You'd be really pleased with some of the offerings that are up there, from salads to 6 to 7 different choices that the kids have every day. The other part of it is just want to make sure the committee as well tonight, and you as well, the government shutdown will have an impact on the school system. If it continues after February 1st, with attention to free and reduced lunch reimbursement. That will stop coming in, so you may see this line item growing, and then we may have to do something about it at a later time, because you can't have a negative revolving account. So hopefully the two sides decide to think about the people of this country and get it done, whatever that is, whatever we believe in, but get it done.
More wall.
Compromise is the last time I voted is what I want from my elected officials, so hopefully they'll be able to do it and we can make sure it doesn't hurt. I'm concerned about other issues as well that we're starting to hear potentially with the shutdown growing or becoming more substantive down the line. So I provided that for you, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out.
I heard part about food lunch, that's all I heard.
I will absolutely take you to lunch. As an elected official, as you know, it will be less than $50.
Joe, he had his free
I heard
lunch,
the
he was here for the
Yeah,
the
Well, actually, you
committee.
had lunch with us because you were
Yeah.
so kind to be part of the strategic planning, and as you saw, it was a pretty good lunch, and that wasn't a specialty for us. That was
Very
literally,
good, yeah.
a lunch that the kids can get, and it was good.
I
So-
seem to remember him enjoying the cookies, or brownies.
A couple times, a couple times. Does anybody else have any other questions about anything?
Any questions we can answer for
I
you?
had one question, just as we were going through the project. Where does the pharmaceutical company stand? I haven't seen any updates, and I was just
No,
kind of wondering.
they're spending a lot of money over there.
I knew that
It's,
part.
I think it's a $36 million project, and they're not expected to be open until the end of next year.
Oh, I thought it was supposed to be this year.
Now, 2020. And we're shocked by that too. We expected they'd be up and running, but the type of equipment they're putting inside is very, very, technology is amazing that they're putting inside their building. But once it's up and running, it's going to be something we're going to be very proud of. And what makes us even prouder is we have companies already asking about the new Blue Star. And it kind of falls into the same category, which means that we could become an area where that type of industry is now looking, and it could change us. It could change the community for us. They've been great neighbors so far. And Iowa has done so many things that most of us don't even know they've done. And, they volunteered, they did town cleanup day, they showed up. They've done work at the Edith Reed, we just purchased that property over there, at the old Girl Scout camp. They sent people in there for one day and did a total cleaning of the whole facility. So they're going to be very good neighbors, but we're hoping that they'll set the trend for everything that comes after them. But once it's up and running, they're talking 200 new jobs. They have to hire all new people, they've never been in the manufacturing side of it before. And if you read them, if you go online and read up some of their success stories, they had a couple of great successes in the last couple of years. So hopefully they'll be around a long time.
I just want to mention real quick, I know that some of you don't know, haven't met Matt Wells, who's our new business manager, took over for Lincoln Lynch. So if you see him around, and if you're cold tonight, call Wade Lazard at 10.
It's freezing when I put my coat on. Yeah,
All of a
exactly.
sudden, say,
That's
"She'll
like
fight
the end
the
of
flu
that's
tomorrow." I know who's getting a 0.
All right.
By the way, you can thank us for having Mike sitting next to you. tonight.
Yes, I appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you guys for all coming. If there's
Thank
nothing
you.
else, motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mary, carries. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.